Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Stuart Cohen. We'll get started in just a moment. I want to thank you very much for attending today's event, Cyber Insurance and how SMBs can get smarter, can take a few steps and be safer as it relates to all the issues around cyber insurance. We'll get started in just a minute.
All right, Stuart, I think it may be time to get us started on this webinar this afternoon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the How to SMBs Can Get Cyber Insurance in the series of SMB Thought Leader Cybersecurity Series that we are presenting from Nodeware. I'm Krista Pisateri. I'm excited to have you here and want to just go through a couple of housekeeping details so that you're aware of what to expect. This series is brought to you as a service to essentially help educate and inspire small and mid-sized businesses to really focus on cybersecurity. So we brought together some incredible experts throughout this series. This is the third webinar. I want to encourage you, if you haven't seen the past two, to go back and check out the replays, which you can find through the LinkedIn events that you probably signed up through, or through our website at nodeware.com/events. This is an interactive discussion. The purpose of this webinar is for you to ask questions and to get answers from people who are living and breathing cybersecurity every single day. With that, I would love to just show you very quickly, if you haven't joined in on the events so far on LinkedIn, we'd love for you to go to linkedin.com. You should see the events in the left-hand side and look for the SMB Cybersecurity Series. You can also go to my profile or Stuart's. You can also visit Chuck Brooks or Bryan Hurd, our esteemed speakers, who Stuart will introduce here in just a moment, and join in this event. You can ask questions, you can give suggestions on speakers you'd like to hear from in the series, and you can also engage and interact with the speakers in our team. You can also find upcoming events in the series on the Nodeware website. If you go to About and go to SMB Events, you can then go to the calendar and see the upcoming events that we have. Our next event is going to be on July 22nd with Dr. Carrie Pearson speaking about building a culture of cybersecurity. So with that, would love for everyone to go ahead. If you'd like to introduce yourself, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. If you have a question, please use the question, the Q&A form, and we will be compiling questions, and Stuart will be helping to facilitate throughout the webinar. Finally, we will have 3 polls, so you'll have a chance to be interactive and engage. So please do engage, stay tuned, and with that, Stuart, I will pass it over to you, and then we can introduce Bryan and Chuck.
Perfect, Krista. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for attending today's session. We are fortunate enough to have Chuck Brooks with us. Chuck has been a cybersecurity thought leader on LinkedIn and throughout the industry for a number of years, has held a number of executive positions at a variety of different organizations, and is one person that is consistently looked at in LinkedIn as an expert to provide great insights. Today, the conversation is going to be around cyber insurance. Some of you might have been on the session we had a few weeks ago. It is on YouTube, where he and Ron Ross talk specifically about NIST and compliance and how small business leaders can start to move towards compliance. We will continue to go throughout this series talking about various things small business leaders can do to get a little bit better, a little bit smarter, and a little bit safer as it relates to their data and their companies, and quite frankly, the investments their investors are making in their organizations to make sure they're safe. We also have Bryan Hurd with us today. Bryan has been involved in a number of different things, was one of the original folks at the NCIS lab in the Navy that he put together. He founded, he started with a group of other individuals, been involved in a number of different government organizations as well as public organizations. And we are lucky enough to have him here today. He is with Aon. He's part of their solutions group for cyber solutions. And has got a great deal of experience dealing with both breaches and attacks, but how to be better prepared to stay ahead of them. So I can't think of two better people to have to talk about cyber insurance. And why don't we kick it off with, probably the biggest question on everybody's mind is, does cyber insurance work? How does it work? How do I get it? And is it actually capable of covering a problem I have after I have an incident? So why don't we start with that, and let's talk about what it is, what it isn't, and how it can be used correctly. Bryan?
Thank you, and thank you everybody for taking time out of a busy day to be here. And Chuck, always great to be on with you and Stuart. So one of the key questions that came from a lot of the small medium businesses was, is cyber insurance a valid risk transfer device? Is it, what is the processes? And we're going to explore that a bit today. But I wanted to start out with the core foundation of the myth that cyber insurance doesn't pay or that it's not worth it. And what I'll do is start with a bit of that, and you'll hear it through our discussions today. But any type of insurance has an application form that will ask you, do you have smoke detectors? Do you have mitigations to the common risks? Cyber insurance is no different. There's a questionnaire you have to go through, and the issue has become, with the rise in ransomware that Chuck and I are going to talk about, it's up 400%, and many of the payouts due to it, the market is what we call hardening. In other words, you have to have better qualifications to be insured. There's been a lot of myths around that insurance doesn't pay. I've been working for an insurance broker now for over 3 years. I'm certified in the field. I've worked mega breaches of dark sides with $10 million ransoms, and as Chuck and Stuart have helped with, I haven't had a problem with the insurance not covering the things it was designed to cover for. But the market is now putting in sublimits and other things we'll discuss in a bit. But a lot of the misperceptions around insurance, it is worth the discussion, even if you end up not getting it, and we'll talk about that a bit in the future. But I look forward to the questions, and I'm glad to bring forward case examples and to educate and or demystify some of the rumors, and really looking forward to the team today to talk about those things.
Chuck?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the cybersecurity and cyber insurance are now essential to link together. I think, just like any other risk with security, in the past, if you were running a brick and mortar business, you get insurance to make sure that nothing's stolen from inside threats or someone breaks in and steals your merchandise. It's really no different, except now we all live in a digital world. So everything is vulnerable and can be stolen from a digital breach. Also, your reputation can be stolen, your privacy can be stolen. So I think all these perceptions that initially came out about cyber insurance were really early stages when it was more of a niche. Now it's really a requirement for any enterprise security. You really can't go without it. The real question is, what do you need personally for your industry or business? What fits your policy? What are your needs? Whether you can afford not to have it, and to understand, what's required to have insurance. Just like anything else, as Bryan was saying, you really have to fill out a questionnaire to know what your vulnerabilities are, what your requirements are, what you value most in your business. In a small, medium business, the world has changed. We're all susceptible to any kind of breach, any kind of attack, whether it be phishing, malware, anything. So we have to look at that in a really a practical and pragmatic perspective. And having insurance is probably the most pragmatic and practical thing you can do in anything in today's life.
You know, maybe to that point, you ought to talk about, right, if you're a CEO, a CFO, a COO of a small business, you know, what are a couple of things you can do, you know, to start to get ready for a questionnaire? If that's the first step, obviously compiling the data to fill out a questionnaire is probably the most important thing to get insurance, or to even get your insurance application looked at. Maybe the two of you could comment on a few simple and straightforward steps that are kind of coming their direction.
Chuck, I'll have you lead off. I'll play cleanup
Sure.
batter.
Yeah, I think most surveys and are focused on really three things: your privacy risk, your security risk, and your operational risk to your company. So those questions are going to gear along those lines. And just by even doing the questionnaire and looking at it, you'll get an understanding of your vulnerabilities to your business right off. So I think what you have to say is it now are you doing the right things that meet this stage? Are you keeping your strong passwords, multi-factor authentication to make sure that your privacy is not stolen? For security risks, you have your data segmented. Is it encrypted? Do you have a policy in your office of who has privileged access? Those basic things. And you know, operational risk also is, you know, if something does happen, what happens to your reputation as a company? Are you going to be thrown out of business? Do you have the capacity to give resilience? Do you have an incident response plan? So if you're looking at those three basic elements, I think you can build around those questions and really develop basically an understanding or a framework of what you may need in an insurance practice. Right?
Absolutely. And then one of the things I'll say is the insurance community, and again, I represent a broker in it, is we're seeing the root cause analysis of all of these cyber house fires of every type. So some of the things that, again, myths that I want to demystify is too small to be targeted. It's exactly the opposite. My first case when I came to Strauss Freeburg / Aon was a 5-person construction company that had an invoice scam due to business email compromise for $150K, which was 33% of that company's profit for the year. And by the time they realized the invoice was for a tractor they didn't buy, it was gone. Even the Secret Service, I got them involved and they couldn't claw back the wire transfer. These kind of things are critical to your security. So a couple of the quick hits, and Chuck nailed it, is multi-factor authentication on your email. So somebody can't log in from Nigeria or Botswana or the Ukraine or North Korea and be you. That is a very easy thing. It's not very expensive. Please put multi-factor authentication on your emails. Don't allow emails to be forwarded outside your organization. That's a way the adversaries do a forward all rule, and even if they lose the login, they're still seeing what you're talking about and the customers you're talking to. And then the other thing is ransomware is hitting all of us. Big, medium, small, doesn't matter. Have a backup. Have a backup somewhere that the same credentials that created the backup can't flatten it if your system administrator's account is compromised. No matter how smart they are, no matter how good they are, make sure you have an extra copy somewhere far away from online. Whether it's immutable storage in the cloud or an extra multi-terabyte hard drive in the filing cabinet, make sure you have another copy of the thing that makes your business, especially for small and mediums, because if you don't have to pay the ransom, that's a great start to your recovery, which is already an expensive endeavor. And those kind of things. So we'll talk more in detail, but some of these root cause analytics play very much to what Chuck and the other webinars presented by this group. Multi-factor authentication. Make sure the endpoint, some type of carbon black-ish thing, pick and choose your adventure. Awareness training, patch management, secure VPN, have an incident response playbook. And if it's your ransomware playbook, print it out. And then also your Active Directory email filtering for spam, and those disaster and backups. Those are the 9 areas that insurers are talking about the controls in that'll help this equation.
To that point, I was talking to somebody from one of the major Wall Street firms about a week ago, and they were talking about how, pre-pandemic, they had a work iPhone to go along with their personal iPhone, but they were told never to log in on their business laptop from their home Wi-Fi, never print anything out, never have anything available on your home Wi-Fi or your router that could get hacked. Well, in the hybrid environment, that's fine for the Wall Street firms, but every small business has had people working from home. Everybody's using business devices. Everybody's got printers at home that are on their home Wi-Fi that are now printing things they shouldn't be printing. From a business standpoint, can you talk a little bit about devices and how do you keep the devices safe? How do you figure out which devices have been exploited or are exploitable? And then what are some simple things, once again, a COO or a CFO can do for a small business that maybe has a part-time, desktop support group, or potentially, an MSP that is providing this service? What can they ask for?
You want me to go first on that? Sure. Well, I think one of the first things you really need to do, because you're right, you hit it right on the point there. The COVID-19 pushed us into a hybrid or remote work environment we hadn't prepared for. A lot of companies, and particularly small and medium companies, had to all of a sudden usurp their operations and move from one office with 50 employees to 50 offices. So it's really, and they don't have the ability to monitor and the IT administration, and it was difficult enough under one office. So I think the first thing you need to do in this environment is have a strong vulnerability assessment to see what may already be on your devices, what may be, what malware code might be lurking out there already. Do you have the configurations right? And all the things that Bryan just mentioned, with your routers and Wi-Fi being secure. All these elements have to be looked at as part of a proactive way to protect yourself, and having the cyber hygiene for individuals and for office. And it's always a fact that the humans are the weakest factor. And Stuart, you mentioned the fact of the cross-pollination of work devices and personal devices. That happens even in work environments, totally, even in government often. So I think that is something you have to contend with. And part of that is knowing who and what's in your system. So I think it's really an environment for really what you need to know and identify more and more, so you can prepare your protection. If something does happen, know where it came from and how to mitigate it.
Thank you, Chuck. That was really helpful, and wanted to just pop in here with our first poll questions so that we can get a better sense of our audience who's with us here today. So the first question we'll keep on here for just about a minute, and would love for everyone, if maybe you've stepped away from your phone or your computer, if you could step back to answer, that would be fabulous. So the first question is, does your SMB currently carry cyber insurance? And we're looking to understand if yes, you do. If you're on this call and you do carry it and you're happy with it, would love any questions that you have for the panelists. So feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box. Perhaps maybe you have the insurance, but you're not really sure about the policy. That's the second answer. Third one is no, but you're looking to get insured, so you're educating yourself on this webinar today. Or fourth, you're no and not interested in cyber insurance, which again, we'd be really curious for any questions you have for our panelists today. So we'll give it just about 15 more seconds. If you haven't voted yet, please do so, and then we will be able to share these responses. Back to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Krista. While everyone's filling out the poll question, I did get a question come in already about how does cyber insurance work when I'm working at home versus when I'm working in the office, since I haven't been in the office for some time and will only go back on a part-time basis. Bryan, maybe you can talk about that, and then Chuck, you might have some comments about how in the hybrid world that's going to be the norm, not the exception.
Gotcha. And just quickly looking at the poll, sorry, go ahead. Quickly looking at the poll results, happy in policy, 31%, yay. Yes, but not sure, 13. No, but looking to get insured, 44. We'll talk about that in a sec. And not interested. Okay, 13%. Good smatter, a good dispersion. So on cyber insurance in general, for those of you that have it, you'll see the premiums going up because of all the problems. For those of you that don't have it, you should get the insurance qualification form because you need to be better than the form because you're now what we call self-insured. You have no insurance. Therefore, the things that would qualify you for insurance, that's a great to-do list for those of you who aren't going to get covered by a cyber policy. So you may want to talk to, there's two types of insurers. There's insurance companies, and then there's brokers that ride above all of the insurance market. Aon, Lloyd's, Willis Towers Watson are all brokers. AIG and Beasley and others are insurance providers. There's a distinct difference in the process of getting cyber insurance, of calling an insurance company or calling a broker who acts on your behalf. There's a difference in fiduciary responsibility and other things, which I won't bore you with, but it's a different animal. Reach out to myself or through the webinar if needed. For how cyber insurance works, here's one thing for you executives on this call, especially for small businesses. It's not just about cyber insurance. It's about your business interruption policy, your kidnap and ransom policy, your crime policy, potentially your E&O and D&O policies, your errors and omissions, and directors and officers policies. There's a fabric of insurance policies, and there's a fabric of enterprise risk, from fires to floods to pandemics. The insurance works usually for cyber on your workforce, even if they're dispersed. But, and as I hand it over to Chuck for his views on this, how you refactored your security for remote work is a critical component. The good news, even for small businesses, there are many solutions, and I'm not going to espouse any particular technology. I'll give an example, like Mobile Iron is a capability to load your work email on your iPhone, and you can't download your email. Now, you can take a screenshot of anything. You could take a picture of anything on your computer, but it's a remarkably inefficient way to steal data, trust me. So that's not, I mean, those things could happen, but you've reduced the surface area by 99.99% if you're looking at implementing these things and multi-factor, you know, not allowing files to be saved off, those kind of things. And with SharePoint, OneNote, and other capabilities, I used to work for Microsoft, but there are plenty of great ones from Google, Google Sheets and others, or other solutions. You can keep work data in a work environment and still empower your remote workforce to bring their own devices, phones, or laptops, and still keep the enterprise secure. Virtual machines is another capability. The final great news, and I'll hand it to Chuck to kind of delve in on this as he sees fit. There's a lot of services for small businesses where a lot of this is kind of turnkey. They can make virtual machines for you. They can set up your multi-factor auth. And there's a monthly stipend, like there's a monthly fee of like $50 to have MFA. It's not what it used to be where you have to buy a whole pallet of it. There are a lot of services for small businesses, including insurance. And Aon has a relationship with what's called CoverWallet, specifically for SMBs around this. But as we talk about what you can do as a leader, and I'll hand it to Chuck for the technical side, is take a look at your risk profile. Email takeover for financial scams, ransomware, or the theft of the intellectual property that makes your company. And you can make some technical moves for that to make yourselves hardened. And then whatever you can't harden, you can talk about risk transfer with insurance for the companies of the right size. Over to you at the news desk, Chuck.
Yeah. No, Brian, excellent points. I mean, everything you said is really pertinent. You know, I look at insurance, I look at, you know, if you're going to apply for health insurance, the first thing they ask you is, what's your diet, what's your weight, your health record, do you work out, do you smoke, etc. It's sort of the same way with cybersecurity. I mean, what have you done to protect yourself? You know, what tools and devices and services are you using that makes you less at risk? And that's what it's all about, being less at risk. So there's really no one size that fits all insurance. And I'm glad to see that the small and medium business offerings are there, because I think there's, you know, if you look at industries, there's such a disparate perception of what they need, and also the threats to a large corporation or a large organization versus a small business. And so I think, you know, you have to look at things. And people in this poll that may have voted for the 13%, I'm not going to look at insurance, you know, I just advise you to look at the legal costs of something that may happen. If something does happen, it's going to far be greater than any cost you're going to pay out insurance over the years. And that's what a lot of small businesses find out, unfortunately, too late. The cost of having legal, whether regulatory compliance issues or class action suit, or whether some privacy has been breached by your own employees or customers, can be catastrophic and put you out of business. So I think for anything you do, you really need to have insurance preparation. And Bryan, I think even more so, I think the insurance world has evolved so much now. You can also get insurance for your reputational management, special insurance for social engineering coverage. There's a lot of variables now that you can really look at as where your profile is, where you're most at risk. And if you don't necessarily have to get a huge comprehensive policy, but something that may make you, operationally fit if something does happen.
And that's a great point, Chuck. Is there are tons of different types of insurance, even in the cyber world, just like homeowners insurance. I was in prepping for this, we were talking among the panel. I came home, actually I was at RSA one year with Stuart, and my wife called me and our basement had 2 inches of water in it. Now the question is that rainwater or did some piece of equipment in my house fail and flood my own basement? The difference was whether insurance covered it or not, surprisingly. I had never read my homeowner's policy. Believe me, I have now. If you look at the process for any type of insurance over the ages, and I'm talking back to the 1800s, insurance companies drive technology and behaviors that avoid risk. Whether it was steam engines in the 1880s or seatbelts and airbags in the industry in the mid-century, and now cyber, they're going to ask you questions about your cyber fitness to vet whether you are a good candidate. That process is great for most companies, no matter whether you actually end up getting insurance or not, because it'll see how external parties will assess you, whether they're your board, your suppliers, your customers, or your insurance company. They're all going to be using the same yardstick. The one other thing I'll say is, depending on which company does it, and there's a lot of great companies out there, when our company does the onboarding or the questionnaire, not the onboarding for insurance, but just the questionnaire, it actually goes against the NIST standard and things that Chuck was talking about on that previous webinar, the continuity between these webinars that Krista and Stuart are putting on. It actually gives you a programmatic overview of your program against that and a few other standards as part of that onboarding process, Stuart. Like you've talked about, the questions to qualify for insurance give you the feedback about maybe areas to address in your program, like Chuck's talked about, the controls around MFA, around ransomware preparedness, or your playbooks. And those are the kind of things that are very helpful, even for those small and medium businesses, even more so. Because, and Chuck, I guess we'll kind of move into like the what happens when stories. When the problem occurs, it's usually somebody like myself or Chuck or others, a cyber smoke jumper that's going to come in and help you. We are the incident responders. We run teams around the globe. And my first question is, are you bringing your outside counsel in, your outside lawyer, your general counsel's lawyer, who usually runs the breach? That's a very expensive endeavor. You want to have that team picked long before Super Bowl Sunday. And you want to practice that team together, even if it's a small team. So we'll talk about how insurance engages in that, but Chuck and Stuart, over to you is kind of, now we've talked about the prep, we've talked about if you need to get insurance, we can talk to you about that, but let's talk about what insurance does and how it's engaged at the time of a fire, flood, or calamity to kind of get through, how it really works. Stuart, over to you for stage guidance as directed, sir.
Well, hopefully you can hear me. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Well, a couple of things. First of all, I apologize. The audio went out on my side for a moment. So 2 things. One, Chuck posed a poll on LinkedIn that I would love to have everybody take a look at when they get a chance. It's about what can someone do as the next step as a leader. And then the second part that I wanted to talk about was specifically around, individuals, right? What can individuals do to better protect their organization? And as an executive, you're worried about business continuity. You're worried about the availability of your systems. You're worried about the integrity of your data, and whether it's what devices are exploitable, or whether it's what devices are back level and need to be patched, or whether it's, you know, what printer at home or what router at home is susceptible. Those are some of the things that, once again, as a executive, people ought to be thinking about what they should do, and maybe you guys could provide some insights as to what they ought to do before potentially some compliance and regulations make them do some things in those areas.
Well, I think what Bryan said is really, it is now a C-suite issue. So it's, when you're talking about cyber threats and you're talking about insurance, it's not relegated to departments or your legal counsel or your marketing or whatever. It really is a decision that it affects the future of your business. So I think the first thing that needs to happen with the C-suite is they need to get educated. They need to really understand what the threats are, what their threats of the industry is, and there's a lot of things they can do. They can follow stuff on even on LinkedIn, social media. There's a lot of information there. They can go to the NIST websites and get frameworks specifically for their industry, whether in retail or health or energy. They can reach out to organizations that have the same interests and other companies in the same area. There's a lot more shared. And I think it's really an imperative now, because I think the landscape has drastically changed from several years ago, where small and medium business we're not necessarily a target now, but as Bryan said, everyone's a target. And the reason this is a lot of these attacks now are being automated. Several reasons. One, I mean, it's very easy to do with machine learning. They're sending out thousands of phishing attacks. They can target hundreds of businesses at a time. It's a really easy thing for them to do. And the other thing that's happening, you're seeing, particularly when we're looking at small and medium businesses, they're looking mostly at criminal gangs. And the criminal gangs are now sharing tools on the dark web. They're cooperating and they're actually sharing in profits. So they're working together. And now with the advent of cryptocurrencies, they're able to get paid and extort money much easier than they were in the past. So those threats elevate the whole scenario and threat environment for small business. And people have to be aware of that, the C-suite top down, because you are not immune to it. And if you don't have preparation, which needs to include insurance as well as all the other things you need to do to better cyber secure yourself and cyber hygiene, you really need to have a plan and a framework and a strategy for your business. And that needs to include having the wall around it, the building, the preparation to secure yourself, and all those tools, devices, your policies with your employees, and cyber insurance, because inevitably you're going to get breached, no matter what you could do. It could be an inside threat, it could be an accident, negligence, or a very sophisticated threat. So you have to be prepared to live in a world where you need to be able to operate, to be able to have your data back working, and your transaction ability to keep going if you want to stay in business.
The other thing I'll say to support Chuck 100%, I hate it to be it is a mutual appreciation society, because we've both been preaching to our throats are raw for 30 plus years each on this. Unfortunately, he looks a lot younger than I do.
I don't think so.
Yeah, this is because I have 3 children. That's what causes gray. The other thing is to bring like we're trying to do, to bring this to what can an executive, either a cybersecurity executive or a CEO or CFO that's on this call as well, and there are many of you on this call. First things first, what is the most critical part of your business in terms of the data you hold? Either the data that is your intellectual property or your secret recipe or your strategic plans, or the data you are entrusted with by others, your customers' data, medical data, whatever those things are. Question number 1 for executives, do you know where that stuff is? And that one question will drive, well, where is it? Is it in a shared drive? Is it on people's email? Is it in various places? And the other question is, where did it used to be? And is it still an old copy of it running around there? I had a breach for a small company, and at the end of the day, we realized that the adversaries had stolen one PDF file with a photocopy of every driver's license of every person that had ever worked at the company in 20 years, which took a small company and made it a medium company. In terms of that's what their HR used to do. They used to take a one-pager, they used to photocopy everybody's driver's license and put it all in one file and left it aging in the shared drive like a landmine from World War II. It was, these things are found at the worst moment. Find them ahead of time. Go find the skeletons in the closet of any size business, bring them to managed locations, and then picking and choosing those technologies and prices to protect that from ransomware, from theft, from unauthorized use, even by somebody that leaves. This isn't just about kids in hoodies, and it never was. It's about international organized crime at the $1 trillion level. You are not going against the 15-year-old. You are going against the entirety of the GRU's retirement program and North Korea's and China's and others. The other thing you're facing is an employee who leaves and knows exactly what files to take. The list of all your clients, the list of all your contacts, the list of your secret formula. You're protecting your company from threats outside and inside by doing all these things. Its final bit, and then I'll hand it back to the panel, is it's not just cyber, it's enterprise risk management, of which cyber is a part. But a lot of this stuff, if your building burns down, where's the data? If it's flooded, where's the data? If you have to evacuate and work remotely, can you operate? Those are the questions that a business leader asks and the cyber team supports. And I hope today we can explore more of those and in the continuing discussion online as well.
Bryan, I like the point that you brought up with HR. I worked for a company several years back. I won't mention the name. My first week on the job, all the employee files were stolen because the IT administrator left the back door open, went on vacation, and they went to China. This company does a lot of work with DoD and other places, and all of those, of course, kind of companies are targeted, as are a lot of small business in the supply chain now, which is another risk. So a third-party risk. So it just shows that every part of your business, whether it be HR, whether it be marketing, legal, your C-suite, everything's a target. So you really have to look at it in a holistic perspective of protecting yourself and me recognize it. And what Bryan just said, anyone could walk off with the file from the inside, inadvertently or purposefully. And so you have a lot to worry about.
And Chuck, to throw a softball over to you from Stuart's leading question of the two witnesses, the standards coming down, and I'll throw out a couple and then I'll hand it to you for kind of a discussion, is the NIST standard is popular and everybody's talking about it. But what also is coming down are US versions of the GDPR, the CCPA in California, the California Consumer Protection and Privacy Act, something like that. Forgetting the acronyms myself. There's a ton of them. Then CMMC, the Cyber Security Maturity Model, is coming out for anybody that makes widgets for aircraft and tanks and things like that. But the big primes are passing it all the way down to their small and medium subcontractors because of the target HVAC company issue. So whether insurance company is talking to you about this, whether it's your regulators because you're in finance, insurance, or at some other regulated industry like medical, or because you're a part of a supply chain that ultimately results in an F-15 or a Joint Strike Fighter or something to that effect, all of these same behaviors and standards are all coming at you from 10 or 12 different directions. And Chuck, you're one of the meisters in the community of how to align that fabric. So I'll hand it over to you for a minute or two.
Hey, Chuck.
First of all, I mean,
Chuck and Bryan, really quickly before you go into answering that question, it's a great time to put up our next poll question.
Sure.
So you can get a little insight because it has to deal with this specifically. So the next question, if everyone can come to their screens and participate, this will help us to speak to you intelligently, but the question is, do you have an information security program that is assessed to standards, whether that's the NIST or the GDPR or CCPA or CMMC or any of these acronyms, ISO 27001, we've got all sorts of different standards that you could assess to. If you can just take a moment to answer the question, that way as Chuck shares more in this area, he can speak a little bit more intelligently to our crowd. So thank you guys. And Chuck, you can go ahead and maybe even start on a high level and we'll give about 15 more seconds.
I think the highest level to start on is GDPR, because it touches the whole world. And, it's dealing with data and privacy primarily, but the difference, I think, that in the past, of any kind of standards, this has enforcement actions where it actually fines companies that don't adhere to the standards. So again, that's a new risk. If you're not compliant, you can be investigated, which requires hiring lawyers, or you can be fined, which could be a huge amount of money. There's pretty high high fines on some of those things. And it's not immune just to, if you're working in the United States, if you do business globally or with a European country, you could be required to adhere to those standards. And I think what's happening now with CMMC, as Bryan mentioned with the DoD, they recognized early on the problems with the supply chain and third-party risks from a cybersecurity perspective, and they're trying to create cyber hygiene up front, requirements and standards that companies, including the very small ones and maybe the mom and pop shop that has 3 people, that are part of a contract with a group of large companies or medium companies that are doing business with the government. So if you're not fulfilling the requirements of CMMC, you're not only liable potentially if something does go wrong, or you may not be involved in any more contracting. You may lose that whole line of business. So I see the CMMC as being, as it happens, it's in the early stages now. It's not just being DoD, but I suspect that a lot of it will be passed on to the other civilian parts of government too. So if you're a small contractor doing any kind of business with government, you need to know this, and you need to follow this. And it goes back to the whole framework issue of risk compliance, risk management, and which goes back to cyber insurance.
Absolutely, Chuck, thank you. And you can see on the screen here the responses. We've got about 44% that has a program that is assessed to standards, about 12% that has a program but not assessing, 28% that does not have a information security program, and 16% that may be a bit unsure. So that can help as well as we talk through a little bit more around how to get started in these areas and how to bring together your team, as Bryan was talking about earlier.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, what I was going to say, and finish up if you want to answer, if you have another comment on that, and then I want to move on to a different topic.
No, go ahead, please, sir.
So I'm just curious, right? Once again, we saw on the last webinar we did, about 40% of the people on the webinar did not use an MSP or MSSP for a lot of the compliance issues they were dealing with. I would just, I'd be curious from your two's perspective, how do you engage an MSP or an MSSP to start to help you with things like cyber insurance, the questionnaire, your exploitable devices, and the multi-factor authentication? As you start to bring those things on board, how do you recommend bringing an MSP online, or do you recommend doing it with a contractor and your own devices with your own kind of desktop support?
And while you're answering that, I've put up the last poll here, which is essentially, are you currently working with an MSP or MSSP? For those of you who are not looking at the screen, would love for you to engage in the last poll, and then we'll show the results as well. Go ahead, Bryan.
So I would say in general, it goes to the core business model question that the executives attending look at in their business. Is your business at the point where you want to engage a managed service provider and or a managed system security provider for 24/7 incident response, like alerting? They want probably, it's interesting, they may not do incident response when you get to the true highest level of it, because then it becomes privileged, but they can at least do the day-to-day security operations center while your employees are sleeping, while it's a long holiday weekend upcoming. And somebody's got at least their eyes on the alerts and logs and knows when to phone an executive to make a decision about, shutting down systems, cutting off a particular account that's acting oddly before it can get to the crown jewels, before it can launch ransomware. So if you're having that type of discussion, the thing you need to do is assess what you think that vendor does and what they really actually do. And there's a great division between what people expect of a cloud provider or an MSP or an MSSP and what actually is written in the contract. And it's very important that not just a cyber person, but a cyber person and your risk person or legal person both have a good Zoom meeting for about an hour or two going through that contract about what the obligations are, what the distinct roles are, and who's responsible for what. And I think, like with insurance policies, again, when you read one about your home, the exclusions are the part I'd start with, the things that are specifically excluded from that discussion. And they're probably the things you thought were included. So if you're looking for the easy or the quick read, I would go for that part of the contract first. And if you're reading a 10K, always read the footnotes first, then go back and read the rest of the report. Because that's where they hide everything, is in the footnotes, right, Chuck? So I think in terms of your strategy, whether or not you go for insurance, the MSSP is either there or not there. There's somebody you need questions from or don't need questions from. But for those of you that have literally an army of one or a small SEAL team of IT, if you're lucky as an SMB, the process for doing this kind of insurance lookover, or at least doing a high-level NIST questionnaire, is probably a good 3 hours, maybe 4 hours. And if they don't have the answers quickly, that's also kind of an indicator that we might want to shine up that part of your program, that they can answer these questions effectively, that you do know what you have in place, what it's protecting, and that the security team understands the waterfront that Chuck and others with the NIST standard are trying to tell you. Your thoughts?
Yeah,
So
great
just,
point, Bryan. And I think, okay, go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, I just want to quickly go over the results here, and then you can
Okay, sure.
move through, Chuck. So it looks like about 25% of our audience has an ongoing MSP, and 19% has a MSSP, a managed security services provider. 38% has an in-house technology and security team or person, and 19% manages without help. So this is the state of our SMB audience at the moment. And back to you, Chuck.
Yeah, no, great points by Bryan, especially read the fine print. And really, I'm surprised that of that small percentage that doesn't have any outside help yet, because the risks are just too high. And I'm a big fan of MSPs because I think, particularly for small and medium business, because the type of expertise and depth needed to protect yourself can't easily be found in an IT shop for a small business. It can't be found in a lot of medium and big business either, because there's a dearth of cybersecurity expertise, a huge shortage of workers. And so you have to rely on some expertise that may not just be with cyber hygiene, but it may be on compliance issues, it may be on physical structure, connectivity issues. So you really need to consider up front, how much you really want to be covered in the event of a cyber breach or cyber attack. And you have to also realize that your in-house IT person could easily leave, or may be the only person that knows something, and which may not be a good thing. You really need to have sort of a balance in that. And I think with looking at outside consultants and MSPs, you can have a more of a pick of the litter of what you can choose. You can do your own due diligence, investigation, particularly with cloud, whether you move your data to the cloud or not. There's other built-in services sometimes. But I think the bottom line is that everyone needs to be covered and look at the threats. And it's good that you have someone in-house, and it's great if you do, and then they stay with you. But I really think in this day and age with the changing threat scenarios and landscape, you really need someone with that could be almost full-time monitoring all of the threats. And it's very difficult to do running a business at the same time. So I think, just running the IT shop is a, and see who could do the call help is a problem often. So I think, looking outside your venture is a good thing to do.
Additionally, and in support, especially of those of you who have those small groups, as was highlighted in the poll, is those people are there to run your core business. Security is pretty much often an add-on for most groups. Now, it should be part of everybody's core fabric, yeah, but those people are there to empower your business in a secure manner. So anytime you can augment them or effectively and economically improve the risk resilience of your business and hopefully the efficiency of your business, it's a great periodic discussion to have. Will engaging an MSSP to do log review free up time of my IT staff to do more innovation or code better applications for my clients and your customers? Look at that in that enterprise way of risk gain and best utilization of in-house resources or leveraged external providers. And I think that's what got your business to wherever you are now, and it's going to get your business to the next level. Security is no different. It really isn't. We love to mystify it, and some of the people in our community, but one good engineer is nice. Good engineering process across your business, a lot better. Same for security. Look for those opportunities to have good, repeatable process that more people can be engaged in, and that you can outsource parts you don't have the time or energy to do. Vulnerability management or log file review or things like that.
Bryan, those are a couple of great points. We've got 9 minutes left. I wanted to make one point. Carrie Person is coming on to do a webinar for us around cyber hygiene. She is the head of the MIT School of Sloan Business around cybersecurity. She'll be doing a webinar for us later in July after the holidays to talk about some things she's learned from some studies she's done and what's been put together in the Harvard Business Review, specifically around SMB executives and things they can do. So we'll continue this conversation with her. Obviously participate in that event and post questions on LinkedIn as well. Before we get to kind of your final remarks, I'd like to just come back to the questionnaire, right? Some people say, well, there's so many things in the questionnaire, I can't possibly fill it out, so I can't even get started. Maybe you could comment on the first few steps you could take to get a questionnaire filled out or partially filled out to begin the process. So is that something, and what you would suggest these organizations do? Chuck, maybe I'll ask you to go first.
Yeah, again, you'll go back to, I think the first thing you need to do is do an inventory of what you have, what devices are connected to your network, who has access to those devices, what applications and programs are downloaded on those devices, what your network security is currently. Do you have antivirus? Do you have encryption? Do you have a policy built in place for employees? All those things are the first start of cyber hygiene. And then you really need to go into look how you can bolster your multi-factor authentication applications, whether you need to do further encryption, whether you need to set new rules, who has access to go to what website or where. Those are basic things in cyber hygiene. And I'm glad your next guest is going to get to that in the next webinar. But I think that's really a start, because if you don't know what you have, it's difficult to move forward. So that would be my first recommendation.
Concur, and that's where what Chuck was talking about the last webinar and the next webinar and this one as a sandwiched in between, absolutely to bring the rising tide floating all boats up about your cybersecurity. To focus on the insurance component for this webinar, I'll play a little bit of the notes of that industry. Reach out to your insurance company for your renewal, or reach out to me if you want to talk to the brokers on our side. We'll get you those questionnaires. You can go through them and figure out how hard they are to answer to get that feedback about the NIST program or other things related. Having that questionnaire and comparing it to your overall cybersecurity plan is a great start, because these all do overlap. The NIST standards, CMMC, GDPR. Once you get all the standards and the names out of the way, about 70% to 80% are all the same questions, unfortunately not aligned or phrased the same. So we've been having this problem since ISO 27001 was BS 7799 back in the year 2000 or even earlier. So this is not new on that side, but doing those questionnaires and getting concrete answers that you can inform not only your strategy, but your risk transfer or your due diligence or your stakeholder discussions is a great place to start. And Stuart and team, thanks for doing this. And if anybody wants to follow up, just let me know.
Thank you, Bryan, and thank you, Chuck, for those recaps as well. I think we have, like you mentioned, we are going to be going deeper into the cybersecurity hygiene and building a culture of cybersecurity on our next webinar. We did also have a question from in the chat about that document, Bryan. So is it possible for you to post that either in the LinkedIn group or for us to include it follow up. If that is possible, that would be fabulous. If not, how can people reach you? And Stuart, any last questions that you have as we close down?
Yeah, Bryan, first of all, how can somebody wants to reach you? Should we have them through LinkedIn? Do you want to have them connect you directly? What would you like to do? And same for you, Chuck.
Reach out on LinkedIn, either through the group or direct. That's quick and easy. We can do the email exchange as well.
Yeah, LinkedIn's always a good place to find me. Happy to, I think I've limited my connections, but happy to be followed, and I'll answer any of your emails if you have anything you want to ask me.
Perfect.
And yeah, I'll work to get one of the documents to post in the group. I'll take an action item there for the team.
Great. Thank you both very much. Before we conclude, I just want to remind everybody, our intention is to provide a series of these educational conversations over the next couple of months to help small business leaders with all of the issues they face. Once again, I come back to business continuity. I come back to confidentiality of your data, the integrity of your data, the availability of your systems, and what are some small and simple, inexpensive things you can do to get started to help yourself and your organization, your employees, your investors, your board be a little safer, be a little bit stronger. We will continue to do that. If you have specific ideas, specific topics, or specific speakers you would like to hear from on this series, please let us know. Reach out to Krista, reach out to myself, put it in the event specifically on LinkedIn, or feel free to put it in the comment section for Chuck's poll. We will get the information. We will get it back to you. We did get asked about a couple of tools that people should use to get started. We try and stay away from endorsing any particular tools. We want to be careful this does not turn into a sales presentation at the same time. So clearly both Chuck and Bryan mentioned a few things that you should do initially, but we are not interested in presenting or endorsing any particular tools at this time. Once again, Chuck and Bryan, let me turn it back over to you for kind of a minute each on any comment you want to make, and then we'll wrap up at the top of the hour.
Great. Well, I think the lesson, I think, for businesses is that any kind of innovation involves risk. And, when you're involved in building something or marketing something or a service, you look at how to optimize it. And security needs to be optimized too. And having a backup for all your security, and particularly financially, being strong with cyber insurance, I think, is an imperative in today's environment.
And I'll say thanks, and please continue the discussion in the group and through Krista and Stuart, who put this great event and many others together. We look forward to exploring these themes and many more with you as a community. We are a small community. Reach out to your peers, get ideas. We're here to help. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks
Thank
to
you,
everybody.
gentlemen.
Yeah, once again, Bryan, Chuck, thanks so much for doing this for us today. For the people on the webinar, if there's topics you want to hear about, if there's speakers you want to hear from, we are very interested in continuing these. Come to our website. You'll continue to see we'll be adding sessions in July and in August going forward. There are trials available for Nodeware if you're interested as it relates to identifying what are the devices that you have. But that's not what today's call is all about. Today is about educating executives, educating COOs, CFOs, and CEOs of small businesses that have a part-time IT person that, as the poll said, may have 40% of you don't use an MSP or an MSSP. How do you survive when you don't have a full-time IT person? How do you do that? What do you use the MSP for? What do you use the MSSP for? So that's why we're providing these sessions. That's what this is all about. We're here to help answer any questions you have. Connect with us on LinkedIn, and we'll continue to hear from you on the various series we have going forward on how we help educate and support small businesses. So with that, we're at the top of the hour. Thanks so much for your time today, and we will see you in July after the 4th. Everybody have a great holiday weekend. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Thank you.